This is Pasta, which I was saying in the first video was one of the great dog names of all the dogs I've worked with. She's a great little dog, but a little bit nervous in the service, and I think the reason for that is she didn't really have, she had some rules, which is pretty unusual. A lot of my clients can't come up with a single rule, but she didn't have a lot of structure, and as a result of that, she kind of got the impression that she was in charge of security, and she had to be responsible for that. So when people move around in the house, she barks at them in protest. So my philosophy, I want the dog to identify like a child to a parent. So what I did was I went over some rules and structure for her to incorporate, for the guardian to enforce, so that she sees him acting like a leader. We have a tendency to think the dog assumes that we're a leader because we're a human, but dogs are about what they see us do. And if we don't have a lot of rules, we're not consistent, we're not repeating stuff, and we're not using good timing, and those are the three things that dogs used to learn. So by having rules, we make it very clear for the dog to see what is and isn't allowed. We practice being the authority figure, and the dog practices listening to us. That helps shift the leader-follower dynamic. So some of the rules we went over is not being allowed on the furniture for at least 30 days or as long as the problem is going on. And then after that point, furniture with an invitation only and only for good behavior. So if we invite her up and she starts barking, she has to get down. Now this is the same authority level as the human. This is more authority than the human. So when it comes to dogs, the higher they sit, the more rank or status they have. If you have the dogs misbehaving, you pick up the dog, you're actually rewarding the dog. So by eliminating the furniture for a period of time, we help the dog see the humans as having a different level of authority. Another rule I have is if a door is closed, I make the dog sit before I let it in or out of the door. I tell it to sit once. If it doesn't sit, within a couple seconds, I walk away, wait 1 minute, come back and repeat the command, only once. If the dog sits then I open the door. If it doesn't sit, then I walk away for next time for 2 minutes, then for 4 minutes, then for 8 minutes. So each time the dog doesn't comply, it has to wait twice as long before it gets another chance to do it. And after a while, the dog starts sitting at the door as its way of saying, I want to go outside. Another rule would be the dog shouldn't be within 7 feet of anyone's eating. Now we're going to use the escalating consequences to disagree with the dog when she does that. And so remember, the first thing we do is we hiss. Second thing we do is stand up abruptly, turn to face the dog, wait for the dog to be stationary. We're almost done. And then we're going to give the dog, and then wait, as soon as the dog is stationary, stands, sits, or lies down, we take 1 step backwards, 1 step with each foot, pause 1 second. We always pause between movements. Then you can go back to doing what you're doing. That's the second consequence. Third one is we're going to stand up and march deliberately at the dog. Now the guardian had a tendency to slow down and to stop before he reached the dog. So if we're doing an exercise like the food exercise we just got done doing, when the dog takes a step towards the food and breaks the invisible boundary we established, and we march towards the dog, we keep on marching towards the dog until it gets outside of that line. Now, I prefer to do it without, but some people find it easier to put down painter's tape and see exactly where the line is, so that way you and the dog are exactly on the same page. As long as you're consistent, you don't need the painter's tape. It's just if you can be consistent. The third consequence, march directly at the dog until it turns sideways or greater away from you. At that point, we stop and we go to the second consequence. We're pivoting until the dog's stationary. As soon as it is, then we take a step backwards. The only time that doesn't apply is if the dog is doing something somewhere, it's in a boundary it shouldn't be. If it turns sideways, we'd still bump into it and keep on bumping into it until it got outside of the boundary. The fourth consequence is the leash timeout. And if you forget how to do all the details of those, please text me or call me, and I'm happy to share those video with the client where we detail those. I want the client to get in the habit of not moving around the dog and moving through the dog. So when the dog is in your way, in a human's way, it learns my job is to defer and get out of the human's way, and that's a choreography that we're developing. And that will help the dog identify as being more of a follower. But anybody who watches my videos knows I'm a big proponent of positive reinforcement. I find a lot of my clients spend most of their time and energy correcting the dog for doing the wrong thing. Every time the dog makes a mistake, you're on it, you're correcting the dog. Now, if we don't have rules, we're not very consistent for that. So rules make the consistency, which make accelerate the learning curve for the dog. But if we only correct the dog for doing the wrong thing, for dogs, good attention and bad attention is almost the same thing. So if I jump up on a human, I get attention from the human being chewed out, or if I sit in front of the human, nothing happens, well, I'm going to start jumping up because that's what gets me attention. Now, anything your dog is doing when you pet it is what you're reinforcing. So if the dog jumps up on a guest and the guest pets the dog, now the dog's being taught this is the proper way to greet a guest when they come in. Problem is when a dog jumps up on a human when they come through a doorway, that's a dog's way of saying I'm claiming you, or I want you to know I'm in charge. And so again, that's associated with her thinking that she's in a leadership capacity. So instead, when we went through an exercise about teaching her not to jump up, So use the leash and try to do that, again, at times where she's going to be wanting to jump up. Don't do it at times she's not interested. But if you have guests come over, put the harness on her first. And make sure you put this harness on her a couple of times a day without taking her for a walk. Right now she got a little despondent because we didn't take her for a walk. But if we put this on her a couple of times a day and she just gets used to it and it's not associated with the walk, then we won't have that same response. So when we have guests come over, put her on the leash, we step on the leash the way I showed you. The person is right outside the edge of the leash and they're turned sideways, away, so the dog's on their side. Then they tell the dog to sit. As soon as she sits, they turn to face her and start reaching slowly towards her and pet her under her chin. As soon as her butt gets off the ground, or she jumps up, we turn, we step outside of her reach, and we turn so she's sideways again. And then we tell her again to sit. As soon as she sits, then we turn. We only say sit once. And then we turn and say, start petting her. Again, be slow in your movements and don't say anything at first. And as we're doing this, after you've done it a couple times, you'll have to tell her to sit 3 or 4 times, not in a row, but per sit. And then after a while, when you turn to the side, you just stay static. Eventually the dog sits. As soon as she sits, then we turn and pet her again. This will give you a lot of repetition, but eventually she'll just start sitting because that's what causes the human to approach me. As soon as I get up, the human moves away. And again, ride the wave. Do it at times where she's most apt to be excited and want to jump up. Let me see. When the human comes home, the guardian should not pet her or interact with her in any way if she's excited. A lot of us confuse excited for happy when it comes to dogs, but excited is an unbalanced state of mind. If we pet a dog when it's excited, we're going to make it a little bit more excited each time we do that, and eventually it's going to be not able to control itself. So when we come home, ignore. And as soon as she stops wiggling, reach over to pet her, and as soon as she gets up, starts wiggling, pull your arm back and go about your business. Don't tell her no, don't chew her out, just lose interest. And you can do this with any unwanted dog behavior. Anytime your dog does something you want and you're petting her, stop petting her. That's a great way to communicate, that's not what I want. It'll take the dog a little repetition to figure it out, but eventually they'll do what it is that you want as opposed to the things that you don't want, because that definitely gets your attention. Going back to positive reinforcement, I want to use as much positive reinforcement as possible. So petting with a purpose. If she jumps on us or nudges us or tells us to pet her, and we pet her, we're telling her that she's the boss. So instead, yes, what we're going to do is when she comes up to us, we're going to tell her to sit. And when she sits, then we're going to pet her under her chin, say the word sit, and just the word sit. The more words we use, the harder it is for dogs to understand. You can vent to your dog if you're having a crappy day, come home and say, oh my God, can you believe that? It was a horrible day. That's healthy. But if you're giving your dog a command, I really say it twice. Sit. And when the dog sits, I pet it and say sit. So once in the command stage, once during the reward stage. Anytime you give a treat, the dog should hear the treat after the dog goes into, hear the command word for the command after the treat goes in their mouth. Sorry, I get a little confused there. Let me see. The guardian does not feed her, I was going to say edibles, kind of a joke, but rawhides, which is good because rawhides are dunked in bleach, ammonia, a lot of other things. However, there's tracheas, kneecaps, cow's ears, pig's ears, chicken's feet, duck's feet. All those things are great for dogs to ingest, and they're a great way to preoccupy your dog's time. Another option is to get a Kong. Looks like a beehive, and you can fill it up with peanut butter. What I do, my little trick, is I take one of these chicken liver treats, which has a really strong smell. You see she's very interested in it. And I put that in the Kong first, then I fill it up with peanut butter. And the first couple times I do this, I let the dog eat the peanut butter, but fill it all the way up. The Kong for her should be about that size. And let her get it all out, and then she gets the piece of meat at the end as a treat. After you've done it 3 or 4 times, then you can actually get a Kong or get several Kongs, put a treat in, fill it up with peanut butter, and then freeze it. When you freeze it, it'll make it take longer for her to get access to all the peanut butter. And as that's the case, then it's a great way to preoccupy her. So if we have a guest or somebody that comes over and they put that on the ground, now she has something to do, or an edible. Something else that I'd like the guardian to do is when guests come over is to give each guest about 10 treats. Tell the guest, hey, we're trying to teach her not to jump up, so please don't pet her or interact with her at all if she jumps up. If she does jump up, if you tell her to sit and she sits, give her the treat for sitting. If you want to give her these treats for whatever you want, just kind of space them out, don't give them all at once, and make her do something to earn it. Here are the commands that she does. She knows sit, she knows shake, she knows this, she knows that. And so now your guests come in and you're helping the dog practice desired behaviors and interactions with your guests. And after a while, your dog comes and sit in front of your guest or play dead in front of your guest or whatever it is. And you've taught her this is the more appropriate way to interact with the guest. Other rules, she should not be within 7 feet of any humans who are eating. That's a way of challenging for the food. Let me see, we're going to use the escalating consequences to disagree, like I mentioned earlier. We can use those at the pool, we can use them at any time. And remember, anything your dog is doing in your presence that you don't disagree with, you're giving 2 thumbs up to. So if she does something you don't like, make sure you respond. And again, within that 3-second window, you have 3 seconds to correct or reward your dog for them to make the connection. On walks, I would suggest every once in a while, just stop and have treats. Every once in a while, stop, tell her to sit. When she sits, give her the treat, and then continue walking. We want her to understand when the human stops for no reason, if I just sit down, I get a treat. That way, if you stop to chat with somebody on Melrose or on the street, you say, you stop, the dog just automatically sits down. That's a great, and people are like, your dog is so well trained. You're like, of course, we hired dog problems. But no, we just taught our dog, this is how we want you to behave. When you meet someone, I want you to sit. If you sit in front of them, manding requires, is a way for teaching the dog that as soon as they sit, they're gonna get a little attention or get something for that. And the more we reward desired behaviors, the more she's gonna be apt to do it. So please make sure you get in the habit of petting with a purpose and passive training, which just means every time she comes to us, we pet her and say, come. Every time that she sits down, we pet her and say, sit. Every time she lays down, pet her and say, lay down, or down, excuse me. We, whenever possible, try to pet her under her chin to facilitate that nose-up orientation. Never pet her on top of her head. You can scratch and you can caress, just don't pat. That creates a down nose orientation. Insecure dogs look down. I think I went through this earlier, but if the dog's in the way, the guardian should just walk through the dog so she learns, okay. Let me see, what else? If the dog is reacting to something, the best thing you can do is increase the distance between the dog and whatever they're reacting to. If it's not a distance, it might be the speed of the object or the volume of the object. So whenever possible, we want to lower the intensity through one of those 3 characteristics till the dog can do what it is we want them to do. We also went through a leadership exercise here on the floor. We didn't film it. If the guardian would like to do that or forgets the instructions for doing that, please let me know. For that one, we really want to practice that one every day until we get up to the point where we're at the 15-minute mark of the dog leaving the treat alone. We would also practice a leave it exercise that we went over. We would like to practice that 2 or 3 times a day. That's very short. When you're doing dog training, unless you're teaching your dog to stay or something like that, training sessions should be less than 90 seconds. So just very short 1-minute training sessions sprinkled throughout the day. And eventually, you know, at this point, we're just going to be dropping it. We don't even have to cage it. After a while, you just throw it down and the dog will like look up at you. You don't even put your hand over it. And then make sure you pick it up, give it to her, and say the word, or leave it. After you've done this enough, then if your dog is trying to trade something you want, you have a leave it command. Teaching her to stay is also something that would be really helpful, especially because she's beginning to develop some separation anxiety. So we put the dog into a stay. Remember, if you do it for the 3 Ds. First for duration, up to 5 minutes, just right in front of you. Put your hand, and the guardian kind of had a loose hand, so he's kind of going like this. So I punctuate it. Stay, because that's the movement you're going to do when you tell the dog to stay. That's the hand signal. Stay, turn it back to your chest and count to whatever your iteration is. Then with the other hand, give her the treat and say the word stay. Remember to always give the treat after, or say the command after the treat goes in their mouth. Once we get to the point where 5 minutes right there, then we want to start moving away. I start out by moving 1 step away, counting to 2, coming back, giving the dog the treat. Then at 2 steps, and then count to 4, and then come back. Eventually, you want to get to the point where you're about 15 feet away, or steps away. Then you want to move beyond the dog's line of sight. Just step out of the line of sight for 1 second, come back, and then go give the treat. Next time, do it for 2 seconds, then 4. You're going to play around with the variables until you get up to the point where you can stay out of the dog's line of sight for 5 minutes. Then you want to do it with distractions. Maybe do it while people are in the pool or people are in the house, or there's things that are going on that she normally would be reactive to. So you're helping her practice a calm behavior by staying while that stuff is going on, which helps her practice not reacting to that and also develops more self-control. And then once we have the stay in place, the guardian should make sure that he starts using it to help her practice being alone. Stay, and then he gets up and goes to get a drink of water. Stay, he gets up and goes and answers the door. Stay, and he gets up and goes to the bathroom. Each time it should be progressively longer and longer, so the dog gets comfortable being alone and not feeling like I have to be in my guardian's pocket or touching him at all times, otherwise I feel incomplete. That's very much where separation anxiety comes from. But I think really the overall thing is she just had, she's practicing a little avoidance. You see how far she's pulling away from me. Yes, we don't want to do avoidance, we want to do engagement. But I think really her problem is that she just thought that she was in charge of security and no one was listening to her, and that was stressing her out even more. Now that the guardian knows how to enforce rules and boundaries and to communicate with her in a way that she understands and respects, by petting with a purpose and doing those things, we're going to teach her the behaviors we want. She's going to start engaging with those and not feel so insecure that she has to bark or react to people. All right, Pasta, it was a pleasure meeting you, sweetheart. I'm probably forgetting a couple things. If I forgot anything, please call me or text me, and don't wait. The sooner you call or text me, the easier and the faster I can get to it. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you need it.